Hi, everyone. Hi. Welcome to the last session of the day. So we're going to do something a little different, which is we're going to tempt the gods of demos by doing a live demo on stage. So we've been talking a lot about secure voting systems, software independence, and you will hear and have heard some of the risks inherent in internet voting systems. And we've had many talks at the Voting Village. Is Michael still here? Michael Spector still here, who has broken a number of internet voting systems, particularly looking at the client software and finding ways to fool the client software or replace the client software or what have you, that are basically focused on mistakes made or inherent weaknesses in the voting system, the internet voting system itself. But that's only one piece of the attack surface of systems like that. And we naturally tend to focus on the part of it that's voting specific. But there's another piece of it that's equally important and at least equally powerful, which is the platforms on which that software runs. So if you've got a mobile voting system, you're dependent not just on the app for the mobile voting system and for the servers that are run on the mobile voting system, but you're also dependent on Android or iOS or whatever mobile platform the system is running on. If I can compromise that, that is equally or more powerful than compromising the software. Now we tend to discount those attacks sometimes in our heads because mobile platforms are by and large relatively secure. The price of a 0-day attack on a mobile platform is very high, and someone might be tempted to say, well, no one who wants to attack a mobile voting platform is going to go after the platform itself, the operating system, because it's so expensive to do that. But when you add state actors into the equation, attacks on the platform start to look pretty attractive. So what we wanted to do to end off the first day of the village is demonstrate the types of attacks that state actors have access to in every mobile voting platform that in every mobile operating system platform that has been developed to date. So these what Brian is going to show are some attacks on older versions of iOS, though equivalent attacks exist for current versions that have been reserved for state-level adversaries, intelligence agencies, and so forth. Sorry? It would be great to do that, I agree. We unfortunately have a binary choice of the lights. So you can either see the screen or you can see us. And my level of... Okay, thanks. All right. You don't want to look at my ugly mug, you won't have to. All right. Philip, I think yeah. Let's see what happens.
That's not too bad.
Okay. How's that?
That's good.
How's that?
Unless it keeps dimming.
No, it becomes binary fairly quickly, yeah. Okay. All right.
There we go.
All right.
Is this microphone on? Yeah, it's on too. Good.
All right. So with that, Brian, are you ready to explain what's going on here?
Yeah. So like any good demo, the demo gods have to spite you right before you kick off. So I've been struggling with a couple of annoying little things, which I'll cover as I go. But essentially, what we're talking about, we wanted to show you some of the reasons why we have great concern over both internet voting, whether it's from a computer or whether it's from, your cell phone. And we've heard the argument about, one of the ones that I've heard recently is, hey, when we first went to the moon, if you believe we went to the moon, the computers that were used were like, less compute power than the calculators we used as kids, right? And now we have supercomputers in our pockets, so surely we should be able to vote from our pocket, right? Like, makes sense. Not really, but the argument sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds like, we've come so far, we've come so far in tech, and yeah, of course we should be able to do that. But the reality is you have a supercomputer in your pocket, and if you have nation-state level funding in a program, then you really, the sky's not the limit for all intents and purposes. There's a lot of things out there that, we talk about, we see in the news, people talk about, nations like the United States and Israel and the UK that have these large budgets for offensive cyber, but most people don't fully understand the true impact of what that means, right? So we wanted to show you just one reason why we're concerned. And there are counter arguments to some of this, but the fundamentals are that if you can get to the root access to the kernel of a device, right, the core operating system of the device, and you can get to the root of the file system, and in this case, there are multiple contexts, security contexts of the file system, but those file system root contexts we can get full access to as well. And like Matt said, this is, you can probably not see it, but there's a CVE number up there on the top. This is a strung together 39 different vulnerabilities that have been patched not that long ago, at least for some of them. And the code for this, unfortunately, a lot of this code that's being used is available on the internet. Now, of course, I and people around us know what we're doing, so we went back and fixed the code and made it work so that we can give this demo. But essentially what you're going to see is when I fire this off, and I'm going to go ahead and just do it, and for the simplicity, I made a little shortcut so I can do this. So I thought it was funny to, as I talk through this, it's a Wikipedia page, right? This is quite literally the mobile operating system security page from Wikipedia that was brought down. And typically what would happen in the real world is some website that you might go to in your day-to-day life would be pre-compromised by some actor. And that actor would then go through and they would embed something on this page. So what's happened is, other than going to something you'd probably go to anyway, it might be your bank landing page before you log in, it might be your neighborhood HOA webpage, it could be almost anything. Other than going to that page, it's a zero click. You didn't have to touch anything. So going through this process, in the background, you can see what's happening, right? You can see on this left pane, and that's the actual stages of it. So I'm gonna scroll down, and I'll slowly go through it since it flew by. But it's actually, you watched it, as I've been talking here, get all the way through those 39 vulnerabilities, all the way through breaking out of pointer authentication control. Who knows what PAC is in iOS? I know there's a couple of you. So it breaks out of that, bypasses it. There's a GPU sandbox. And so it's one of the many sandboxes in this chain of vulnerabilities that breaks out. So that's built by Apple to be ultra secure. If you think just because this one's patched that the one in your pocket right now is not vulnerable, you're wrong. I know for a fact that the current iOS is absolutely vulnerable. So is Android. So this isn't a fight between the different platforms. But as this continues to go down, and I'll just keep scrolling through it, you can see it jumps into multiple sandbox escapes, and then it starts to run what's called in that world post-exploitation after each of those, that basically kicks off the next stage of the chain. And it just keeps going until finally it starts to exfil its own data for you. And that's essentially what's going on in the background. You notice, if anyone wants to come up and look, I hesitate to mess with the USB cable here, but that's just a quick time view of what's on the live phone right here. So you're welcome to see it. I'll do it again afterwards. It only takes a few minutes. And it goes through and pulls everything. And so you could see it made it all the way through, and it's pushed everything up to a C2 server, and nothing has happened. The web page hasn't crashed. It hasn't redirected to some other page. Other than the phone gets warm with this type of attack because it's actually heating up the GPU. Anyone wants to talk tech, I could explain why, but bottom line is it's making the GPU do things it's not supposed to do, right? It's abusing it. And that causes all of this to then step through to the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this for a second here and go over, and naturally it didn't pull. So these things, it has what's called a race condition. And so it's racing this mathematical issue to the end, and it doesn't always, oh no, look at that, it's still pulling. It's not done. So you can see it there. I thought maybe the demo gods were going to spite us again, and it didn't pull the files I wanted to show you. You could see it's pulling pictures. You know, there's one of my knee there when I was driving, and it pulls like pretty much everything on your phone. It just pulled a list of all the Wi-Fi passwords, which I'll show you in a second. So you can steal my hotspot Wi-Fi up here. It pulls all of your cloud accounts, so Apple, Google, Gmail, whatever you're logged into. Your AWS account, if you have it logged in on your iPhone, it'll pull all that. It pulls your Proton Mail, your Proton VPN. It'll actually pull your pre-authenticated token. So that's the token that after you've already been through two-factor authentication, that's the token that can be used for a period of time to log in as if it were you. Some of those the stack is done a little bit better than others where it has to come from that same device, but the point is, you can pull all of that. And we're going to talk through some other implications of what this means as the group here starts to talk. So, again, keychain, it's still going, it's still pulling things. So it takes about 3 minutes. And ultimately, let's see if it's pulled a bunch of the credentials. It hasn't got to the message database yet, but when it does, when we see it, we're going to see it's going to pull the Signal database, the actual Signal, secure app database. And the parser is broken at the moment, but the demo gods, of course, messing with me. But essentially, it pulls that database and decrypts it on the fly, and then pulls the WhatsApp database, the Telegram database, the Threema database, all of those secure communicator databases that are on your phone, pulls them all. And there's a lot of people that'll talk about why you're still secure, and you're not generally, because you have to think about it as a stack, right? So you have a runtime environment that all of those applications are running within. So if you're going to view your app, you're going to view your encrypted messages, well, something's going to have to decrypt the message so that you can view it. In the process of doing that, that token is somewhere on your device, which means if we have got access to this device, which we do, then we're going to be able to pull that and decrypt things on as well. The concern there becomes that if I have that level of access to everything, to Signal, to WhatsApp, to sandbox apps, this applies to, there's a demo I gave last week to a group in DC that we're pushing bring your own device for things like sandboxed business applications, email, Excel and Word, and all those types of things that people want to use. And the reality is that yes, they are more secure than just not having it. But if you have this level of access to a device, which nation states do, and that's one of the things that we've heard a lot in the news, right? Nation states messing with, abusing voting systems potentially. They have the kind of budget to do this. So. I'm losing my voice. I'm going to turn it over to you to say some things while this continues.
So I'm fortunate to be sitting next to Michael, who is well known as somebody who attacks internet voting systems before breakfast. And the focus of his work has been on looking at the apps and the servers and so on. And he has essentially pretty much a 100% success rate there. But the answer is always, well, we fixed those problems, and therefore those problems no longer exist. I'd really like to hear Michael put some context in this type of attack on top of the types of attacks that he's looked at.
I wish that...
You're going to need to close talk the mic
to what?
Close talk.
Close talk? Can you hear me? All right. Sorry. I wish that the attacks that I did were as complicated as this. Everything that we found was not this difficult to pull off. We've heard a lot from folks sort of claiming, oh, device security has gotten good enough, it's gotten good enough, it's gotten good enough. But it's not entirely clear to me that it's ever really gotten that good. It's good to have a formal proof of it, so I think, thank you for that, I suppose. But the vulnerabilities we found, you're still relying on the network, you're still relying on servers, you're still relying on various other things. So to give you a really just simple example, one of the systems that we broke ended up being used in Venezuela for the Venezuelan Consulta Popular, which was sort of this government in exile survey that they were doing. Remarkably, the attack, we were looking at this terrified a little bit that they were going to look at our paper, which had been published at that point. It was public, all of the vulnerabilities we found. And as far as we knew, they had not been patched. And we were terrified they were going to do this and find some sort of other thing to knock the election around. But it just turns out that the Venezuelan government had control over the network. So what do? They blocked the voting system company's site at the AS level, so that on voting day, no one could actually get access to the site. The attack was even dumber than this, which I guess is par for the course given the other attacks that we've seen. But all of them rely on the primitives that are being broken here, even sort of in the best case.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is yet another example of why you shouldn't do this.
Yeah, I think the point that I wanted to get across, I think we were on a board meeting for the foundation. They're like, well, what are you going to talk about? You don't usually get up and talk. Well, okay. Let me show you something that I was working on for another demo. And, the point being here that there's a lot of these that exist today. There's a lot that you can download and play with yourself. You do have to, get Ghidra and do some reverse engineering and memory offsets and a bunch of other, technical things. However, the point is that these exist, especially at the nation state level, in pretty much every device you can imagine. They do. It's a fact. Everyone gets worried about, NSA or the FBI or some foreign government, intelligence agency, using devices to listen to their phone calls. Well, with this, you can do that without actually having to attack from a signals intelligence perspective, from attacking the RF. This allows you to also listen to all the live audio. This also allows you to turn on a hot mic. This also allows you to do anything the phone can do. That's the level of access these give. These full chain nation state level, systems that absolutely exist in the world, and the United States is not the only one that has them. They exist everywhere. Anyone that has, the money to pull this off. The Russian business network, right? The Russian mob, they all have this. Many much smaller countries have this. People are worried about things like Pegasus, right? That's in line with this. This is a little bit more in depth than their standard offering was, but the point was these exist. And if this exists, then you absolutely can expect that someone will get to the root of the phone, someone will take control of the phone, and they will find a way. And there's other solutions. And I know, David, you and I were talking about this yesterday, so it might be good for you to comment on this a little bit. But there's a number of approaches to understand the tamper resistance, to understand that you can use multi-device two-factor authentication, right? So more than two-factor authentication. There's a number of things we've heard against this, and while that's all true, I did say we get all your cloud accounts right through this. We get all those tokens, and so maybe you're using an iPad and an iPhone. Well, your iPhone, we can log into it now too. So, David.
Yeah. So the formula that I've been using for about 27 years to talk about internet voting of any kind, phone, mobile or not, is that there isn't any combination of technologies today or in the foreseeable future that isn't vulnerable to hacking of various kinds. What we're seeing here is that even if a vendor of an internet voting system built a perfect application, perfect on the client side and perfect on the server side, they don't control the platform below it. And if you can attack the platform below it, as Brian is showing here, the kinds of attacks he's showing are able to read your signal file. They're able to get into your protected enclave. They can do anything on the phone. It just doesn't matter how perfect the application is, 4 levels of abstraction above what we're talking about here. And so there's no way to secure the phone. Now, I've heard arguments such as, okay, code voting, for example, will prevent this, or will ameliorate this. Those of you who don't know what code voting is, that's a system in which the voter is told through a separate channel, not through the phone, but maybe through snail mail. If you want to vote for candidate A, type 3652. If you want to vote for candidate B, type 7215. And you give 4-digit numbers which are specific to that voter, so only that voter gets these numbers to use to vote for the particular candidates he might want to vote for. Now, the software in the phone doesn't know what those numbers are, and so the software in the phone can't reliably, at any rate, vote for you. But what it can certainly do, and that makes it more difficult. I don't even think that's actually true. I think it actually can, but it takes a lot more time. But what it can certainly do is prevent you from voting. It can absolutely prevent you from voting, but perhaps make you think you did. There's no way that I can even imagine to get around this kind of vulnerability, which is one of the reasons that I think mobile voting, internet voting of any kind, is, for the time being, hopeless.
Yeah, and I'm willing to go farther than the time being for, I think it is one of the fundamental problems of computer science. And if we could solve mobile voting, we could solve the problem of bugs in software, which is a problem that has been with us since the very beginning. I just wanted to point out, with all due respect to Michael, who I am a huge fan of Michael, and I think he's one of the smartest people I'm privileged
I'm very
to know.
afraid about what's coming next.
He has been, he's been sort of cheating in that he's looking at systems that are uniformly terrible. Right, the people peddling mobile voting platforms are really bad at it. They're not doing nearly as well as they could be doing, and he has been plucking off low-hanging fruit remarkably quickly and very articulately explaining what is wrong with these systems. But there's always a lingering tendency to read his papers and say, I could do so much better than that, right? They made a bunch of really dumb mistakes. And now what we're seeing is that that's the easiest way to attack these systems. But at some point, they are going to get better at doing this, unless this idea dies a well-deserved death before they do. When that happens, there is this second very mature platform that still has vulnerabilities in it that will provide an equally fruitful path. And you were dying to ask questions.
He mentioned you, so you get to talk.
I will be maligned and not allowed to reply to it. No. I've been maligned, but I also completely agree with it. Everything he said is true. The systems that I've looked at have had very basic concrete issues. Some of them would allow an unprivileged network observer. So, for example, you're like, Wi-Fi, crappy Wi-Fi router, to be able to tell how you voted, right, before you actually got to cast your ballot, just because of some of the sort of silly cryptography they were using. And yeah, if they do better, people will do better. I was actually very disappointed at the end of the majority of them. Because I went through this whole process of reverse engineering obfuscated code and re-implementing the server and doing all this painstaking analysis, and it's like, oh, that's all you guys are doing. But yeah, people will eventually do a little bit better. I think fundamentally there's a lot of problems related to just basic software. Anything that can exfiltrate a bunch of data from your phone is probably going to know how you vote. It has your private messages. It knows how you're communicating with people. It's a high probability that it's going to be able to say, oh, well, maybe this person just doesn't get to have a phone on election day. can turn it off too.
You've been dying to ask a question.
We have a question.
So I've been tearing apart hardware, software, systems, very complex things. I get a lot of joy out of that. But we've been dealing with fraud.
You should introduce who you are.
Oh no.
Hi, I'm Atlas. We've been dealing with fraud for a couple hundred years now. Fairly well. Everything always comes back to provability after the fact. Is there a way that we can have a paper trail given anything that we're talking about? I love the use of technology. I love the use of technology to make things simpler, faster, easier. With a paper trail we can fall back on.
Yeah, and that is one of the fundamental problems of internet voting, is that this is an inherently non-software independent approach. So there is no ground truth for what your interaction on a screen was.
And I want to know that my vote was what I did.
Right, and that is a fundamentally absent property of this. If your entire user experience is mitigated by a malicious platform, then ultimately you don't know what has been recorded outside of the experience that you are able to look at. So, there are great approaches. If you were earlier, if you were at the end-to-end verifiability talk, right, we can see things that get us tantalizingly close to that, but still require that there be a component that you trust. And you have to, whatever you're looking at to verify the election has to be trustworthy, right? So that, and that's a fundamental problem, right? So there has to be a trustworthy path to something that that shows you what's happened. The hypothetical that I always use for this: imagine we had mobile voting in the 2020 election. As bad as the disinformation about, Venezuelan satellites were used to hack power strips, which were sending hacking rays into the voting machines, and so on, which were relatively easily refutable, because systems simply don't work that way. If the claim was simply there was malware being distributed in the mobile voting platform, and in fact you could create an example of this and put it on someone's phone somewhere, we would never be able to move forward from that.
And I just want to add a short comment that we're talking about this as though if we ever instituted internet voting, we would have all these vulnerabilities. That's why we don't want to do it. But I remind people that 33 states in the United States now allow internet voting for at least overseas and military voters, typically email or fax voting, and those are just as vulnerable to all of these comments as more sophisticated voting systems.
One thing very quickly before we move on to other questions. The thing that you brought up that I thought is very interesting is fraud, right? And the thing that I think is so interesting about fraud is a lot of people get away with it, right? And what happens when people get away with it? Well, in the fraud case, the bank eats the cost, especially for like credit card fraud or something like that. And, it's the cost of doing business. You just move on. In elections, the ballots are cast, the election is over, it's been certified, what are you going to do? It's a much more finite object.
And I might add that if whether the fraud is detected or not detected, you both are problems. If it's not detected, the wrong people are elected. If it is detected, then the entire trustworthiness of the election system then becomes a public matter, and people completely lose faith in the election systems. Either way is a disaster.
And I think to directly, at least, I'll speak for the group, but and refute me, but I think it's pretty well known that most of us have said the same thing. physical ballots, especially for now, with all of the serial numbers, all the physical security, tamper things, etc. Scanners, so that you get the election night results, and that's the best approach for now.
And I would also say, none of us here are anti-technology by any stretch of the imagination. We are all technologists by trade. And in fact, if it were possible to do secure internet voting, that would be awesome.
We'd love it.
Right. Because not only would it mean we would be able to vote remotely, we would solve pretty much all of the major security problems we have everywhere else. I mean, that would just be phenomenal, right? But the problem is we are simply not there at this point. All right, now you have been dying to ask a question.
I thought about this like literally just now.
More than any of the rest.
That's the best kind.
Here's the thing. I think that you've made a lot of really good points, and I'm imagining all of the cool technical systems that address this. Like, you have self-for, it's a formally proven microkernel, all this cool stuff. And then I realized that the hardware needed to run secure operating systems is always going to be more expensive and less accessible. And the people that cannot vote conveniently right now are people that are busy with work on voting day. They're people that are in areas where voting isn't as accessible, and those people are not going to be helped by a secure system where you need to buy a device that's supported or go to a physical polling station.
Consider the people who don't have updated phones.
Exactly. I think that it is a fundamentally wrong approach for our current system and basically every current democratic system on Earth. But I do want to talk to you guys afterwards if you have time, because there are some other systems where mobile voting would be very cool.
Yeah, real quick, just on that point that we made, in terms of how many systems that this exact chain right here, these 39 vulnerabilities, I looked it up the other day. It was about 65% of the iPhones on Earth, and probably half of the ones here in this audience are not patched against this. That's just fact, directly from Apple, not from me.
And the rest of them aren't patched against something else.
The rest of them are patched against something that isn't yet a end-day, meaning it's been patched, right? Yes.
Sure. So I want to add a little bit to what you're saying about internet verifiability, correct a few things, and how it works here. I want to be very clear. I am not in any way advocating internet voting in any form. There are some fundamental problems that go beyond anything that people have talked about here, like coercibility. Yeah. You lose the protection of voting in a voting booth where you're not being coerced when you don't vote in person. Or targeted denial of service, where you can attack a certain demographic or a certain region and sway the vote just by making a part to vote in certain places. End-to-end verifiability does address a lot of the concerns that you said it doesn't here, but there is a fundamental but very, very subtle problem that you get. And that is when you're voting in person on government equipment, statistically, the statistics, you can take advantage of the statistics. If one person finds that the document can prove a problem, then the whole election is legitimately called into question. If I'm voting on my phone and I find that there's malware on my phone that has changed my vote, bad Josh, but that's not going to overthrow the election. It shouldn't. So if 1% of the people are checking in person, that's great. If 1% of the people are checking on phone, those 1% can use other means to find that their vote has been changed and they can correct it. But that 1% gets corrected, the 99% who didn't check have had their vote switched undetectably. That's the real fundamental problem.
It's a fundamental problem. Right. I mean, the fragility of these systems, which is, all right, you find out that it's wrong, and then what? Right? In a software-independent system, you don't have to rerun the election. Right? In a software-independent system, you don't have to rerun the election. end-to-end verifiability just tells you you're screwed. Right?
Yeah, and I would say if there's end-to-end verifiability, sorry, I'm losing my voice, and I've been here like for a week already. The part of the problem is we're talking about nation state level, which is actually becoming, the barrier to entry is lowering, so it's not just nation states at this point, right? But we are talking about that level of attack. And so in order to do something like you're talking, which I don't disagree, you also need to have conceivably a site that is available for you to go and check and verify, right? Which would also be attacked. That's the kind of thing that would happen when there's a nation state going after it. Sorry, I know. You would hope, yeah, absolutely.
So these are systems concerns, right? It's not just, so, a good example, so for context, for people who don't know, in the front row is one of the creators of end-to-end verifiable voting systems. It's really hard to have say anything, in front of him because he knows more than I'll ever. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know about end-to-end verifiability. But I will say, like, one of the critiques I have of this notion is that you can use cryptography to solve this problem. First of all, a lot of the systems concerns still exist. I'll just melt your phone. I don't care about you actually being able to verify or not. That'll disenfranchise you just as well. And the other angle is the dispute resolution, right? I claim that my vote has been flipped. The elections authority says, nope, sorry, it hasn't. Where do we go on from there? What do you do once you know something bad has happened? And that's not as well defined as I'd like. And I've seen your work on this. It's really good, but I don't think it doesn't feel good yet.
Right. So, I mean, end-to-end verifiability fundamentally provides you a way of having confidence in a good election. It doesn't help you correct a bad election.
There are suggestions I don't think are great that have like a period for challenge and period for correction and whatnot.
You're right. They're fundamentally incompatible with how we actually run elections. Right. I mean, there are a lot of problems that are easy to solve if you say just rewrite the Constitution and reorganize the U.S. government. There may be unintended consequences to doing that, but and that goes a little beyond our scope. But I mean, we've gone a bit far afield here. Our point is only that the point of our talk today is just that there's more to it than just the voting system itself. This is a systems problem. And even if you were able to mature the level of security in the voting software itself, we still have the platform problem. These mobile platforms are much, much more secure. They're locked down to a much, much higher level, and yet vulnerabilities that let you take complete control of the platform remotely are available to state actors.
Yeah, and it's a systems problem. We can probably pound that drum all night. If you find a way to fully solve the systems problem, back to Matt's point, in the software stack, you also have the radio firmware stack on these devices. There's a number of attacks, and as a disclosure, I am not saying anything about my prior work with any entity. This is all stuff you can go out on the internet and find, right? There are baseband attacks against some phones, including the current ones that are out, and you can go out on Zeronium and see that they have them listed. Like there's places you can go and find this, and then we can talk about cryptography solving the problem from the end-to-end perspective, but then I go back to nation-state level and things I've seen in my career, and I know many people here have, that there are ways that they can attack that too, and of course it's a cat and mouse game. So things keep getting better, and it gets better on both sides. And it's been that way for the 25 plus years that I've been doing this. So, again, systems problem. We wanted to make the point and just show, not saying that never will it happen. It's the dream. I think we're all technologists. We would love to see this improved, but we're trying to show you, what part of the core problem is today.
Right. Historically speaking, if someone tells you all these problems have been solved, there's reason for skepticism.
Very good.
All right, are we done? All
I
right,
think
thanks
so.
everyone for coming
Thank you,
to day
everyone.
one. We'll see you all tomorrow, bright and early at the crack of 10 a.m.